for volunteer damage shelter again.
Good, good.
You'll be right there.
Here?
Yes, sir.
You doing my good?
Doing all right?
Good, good.
I'm good, sir.
Well, you know what I want?
The list is short. The content could be
Yeah, it's funny because I don't think there's much.
I like everybody to take it off, but that one, especially after when it's just, when my hair is down, when you green.
And
brother.
my hair all up. I look like I was trying to straighten it
These are a lot cooler than these down here.
It's good.
Yes. Outside feels not too good.
112 by Tuesday. Should be fun and games.
My car today said 112.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I left work about 30 minutes ago, it was 111. Man, and I had my pickup pulling off before I got in.
The emulsion that TxDOT put down on 285 is starting to liquefy.
And it's gonna be, and it's supposed to get harder all week long.
The program we found called Video Office.
We're still waiting on Councilman Pecos, and haven't heard. He's coming, just pulled up, and then I guess we need Councilwoman Vaca to call in.
Whatever. I know we
No, she's calling in. The you and Mr. Pecos would be the ones that are here.
I've been taking Video Office because that's how the cell chart says. Oh, it's pretty good. Whatever it's called. It does a good job.
How do you remember last time?
Is that what you used to make those? A lot of it. It's become a big help. Everything looks cleaner.
Are you done?
Oh, I know that. Yeah. There'll be a lot more stuff. Like the app one too. See the app video too? That was on that page.
Hello, everybody. Hey there, man.
That one, let me know.
Sure. I teach all the Bible studies on Sunday mornings, and then we speak. And I always tell the people, all of us are different on some way or another. People just don't listen. And like your love is a passion. For me, I like what I do in my job, but it's just I love being around people. I like talking to people. I witness a lot. I talk to them a lot about God. It wasn't like that for a long time, but folks that are not good, talk to people. There's some different, like my brother. He's a police officer there at the hospital. They call him because he's my bass player too. We're the worship leaders at it. So, you know, we do a lot of ministry. This was a yes. It's all it is. So I went and talked to the pastor, Pastor Ronnie.
Oh,
I told him, he goes, well, you're going to step up. Well, I guess, I mean, I don't have a choice. I don't have a choice. Sure, and I've enjoyed it. But, you know, just like the chance that I've done with you. This is my favorite.
Did I hear Baca call in?
Yeah. But this one didn't stop like that. This one was like, not like the other one where the bottom fell. This one did. It's just like they stopped it because of
Councilwoman Baca joined us yet?
I believe so.
So, you know.
I'm here.
Okay, good. All right. So we have everybody here. We're just waiting on Mr. Tejas to get ready.
Is that there?
Ready for it.
Go ahead. Yeah, set some phone. Hey, John, you need to put your recording device up here.
I can, well, they can probably work okay as long
Okay.
as, so that I can hear.
Yeah, the volume's up pretty good. So,
It's just.
what was that question, Councilwoman?
Who has to start up the person?
We've got Councilman Saldana and Mr. Tejas are here in person. Everybody else is participating by phone. So we'll call out who all's here in just a minute. There's that list.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Oscar, is our video live?
Are we live?
We're good? Okay.
It is now 5:33. Start off with the invocation by, so we'll give it over to
Councilman Rowan.
Arona. Okay. Councilman Arona.
Heavenly Father, we ask you that you come before us, give us the strength and the knowledge and the courage to do what is right for our town. We ask that you send your angels of good health and your honesty and grace to all at this time, our families and friends who are contacted by the coronavirus. May you bring to recovery and good health and bring this country to a united States of America as it responded in your name. This rest in your name, Heavenly Father. Amen.
We now have the Pledge of Allegiance by Councilwoman Trujillo.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Thank you. You'll have to bear with us because we're traversing Virgin country right now. Let's call to order the meeting for Thursday, July the 8th. It is now 5:34. We already had the invocation and the pledge of allegiance, and we'll go on to the public comments.
Mr. Tejas, if I might, I just want to, for the record, roll call those that are here and participating in the meeting. We've got present Councilman Saldana and Councilman Tejas. Calling in by the phone, we have the mayor. We have our city manager, Seth Sorensen. We have Councilman Art Arona, Councilwoman Veronica Baca, and Councilwoman Valerie Trujillo are all present and participating via technology. And so at the front end of the meeting, I will, again, ask for a little bit of patience because we are treading some new technology and some new processes during this time, but also a couple of things to consider as we go forward to help the meeting go more smoothly. Council, for those that are participating by phone, I would ask that when you speak up that you would identify yourself by name so that we and the public know who's speaking and also so that we can get it correct in the minutes. So anytime you speak up, please identify yourself. Also, continue to be mindful of any background noise. Art, if your cat starts barking, we'll pay you lots of money. I said if your cat starts barking, we will pay you lots of money. The other thing I want to check is Is everyone on phone watching the meeting through the YouTube channel? Is everyone able to see the meeting as it progresses?
I'm not.
Okay, all right. If you are watching the meeting and you're calling in by phone, just watch out for the echo effect, because if your TV or computer is playing the audio and your phone's picking it up, it can create an echo. That's not happening right now, so I think we're good. Final question I had, does everybody participating by phone have a copy of the handouts and the presentation that we'll be going over?
Yes.
I don't have the copy of the budget.
Okay.
I know Sarah was supposed to see it, but I don't know if she sent it to my personal email or what, but I don't see it.
Okay, she's going to send it to you right now so that you'll have that budget document.
Send it to my personal email. She knows that she sends it all the time. Okay, so.
She's doing that now?
Right, sure.
All right. Mr. Tez, that's all my comments. Thank you.
Okay, I have one public comment. I'd like to say public goodbye to a good friend of mine just passed here recently, Albert Alvarez, A.B. Alvarez. He was a true patriot. He worked on the Veterans Memorial, and he was our Pecos historical person. He knew all the history about Pecos and West Texas, and he will be sorely missed by all his friends, because he never met a stranger. Goodbye, A.B. Thank you.
I have something to say. I just I've been getting a lot of phone calls and texts about, in the paper it said about our tax rate, about raising our taxes. I just want to tell the community that really it's just a rate that it hasn't been set yet, because we don't know all the numbers and all the figures, not until we come to the end of this workshops that we have with the budget. So I just want the folks relax. We're not raising taxes. I mean, we're in a state right now that we're trying to work out how we're going to do this. But don't just go by what you read, because it's just something that's proposed, and we're listening. We're listening to you guys, and I'm a taxpayer myself. All of us are. So just I just wanted to just encourage you guys just to relax. Let us go through this and see how we come out of this when it's time. But I don't see us raising taxes. We're just not in that kind of position right now. But I'm not a financial expert. Later on through the budget meeting, we might hear something different. So I just wanted to say that's all I wanted to say. But just relax. Thank you.
Thank you. Item D, the consent agenda.
Are there any other public?
Any other public comments?
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay. Anitra Bradfield, 205 South Cherry Street is where I live. And thank you for your comment. But yes, I am against even raising the taxes. And yes, I think before putting out to the public, it would have been nice if you had already kind of seen what your budget was, so that you could give an accurate amount if you were going to raise taxes. But I don't think it's a good idea. A lot of people are going through a lot of problems right now. I myself, I even had to ask for help to be able to take care of my own home payment, because my husband lost his job, and I'm not the only one. And there's other people that I know that they've lost their jobs. And adding this and the government even has, they have allowed deferred payments for people to pay on their houses. And so what I'm saying is it's not a good idea to raise the taxes, and I've heard what you said. But like I said, I think you're budgeting. If you're gonna say we're gonna propose this, it's better if you had looked through your budget first. So then when you put out to the public, you have accurate information. If you don't want people to be going, well, don't be scared, that's not accurate, well then don't put it out there unless you have an accurate budget, and then let us know. That way we aren't also freaking out also on top of each other. But I think you need to take that into some serious consideration, because a lot of people have lost their jobs. Second thing I have, it's not on your agenda, but have come in and I have asked, I have concern for this town, city hall, what do we call it? It's not very, I'm trying to say this in a lovely way without being too harsh. When I drive up and I've had to come in here or things like that, it's not very nice when employees are sitting there smoking right out front and then they flick their cigarette, which is considered littering, right by my vehicle and other people. That's just disrespectful. So as a city council, it would be you have an alley. Could you please, besides me having to come in here and ask people and then it doesn't stop, could you please ask them to go to the alley and smoke their cigarettes over there? That would also look better on you guys, and so those are my two concerns. So thank you for your time.
Mayor and Council, I don't know if y'all can hear me very well. I just wanted to share that right now, Cyrus Nichols, City Secretary, that we are currently taking applications for to fill 3 spots on our Planning and Zoning Board. I've had it in the paper for the past 2 weeks. It's going to be in there through July 23rd. And so I'll be taking those applications up until 5 p.m. July 23rd, so I can present those to council to hopefully fill those spots. So I'm encouraging residents or anyone that wants to be involved to please reach out to me and so we can get an application in.
We have 2 vacancies?
We have 3.
3.
Yes.
We have 3 positions open.
This is Councilman Ardo. I would just like to make a comment on last Thursday's Veterans Memorial presentation. Just like to say thank you to everybody, especially Ali Jiraki and all the crews. I do not know the names of everybody, but I would just like to say thank you. As a fellow veteran, I'm pretty sure all of us feel the same way. We thank you for what was done for all the veterans who have served, who are serving, who gave the ultimate sacrifice for our country. On behalf of all of us, I would just like to say thank you to everyone.
Thank you, Art. I would say the same as Art said. It was a beautiful, it was a pretty day, no wind, and everybody was happy at the end and the beginning. So thank you to all our staff, Holly, everybody that helped, our city employees. They did a fabulous job. Thank you. Okay. Next on the agenda will be the consent agenda. Item E. We have to approve the minutes of June 25th, 2020 regular city council meeting. Second item is approve the minutes of the June 25th, 2020 budget workshop. Number 3, approve. Approve.
It's on that hard copy as well. It's June 15th.
Approve the minutes of the June 15th, 2020 PEDC board meeting. Number 4, approve the expenditure report. Number 5, approve the June PD call report.
Does anyone on the phone have any comments or questions on the items on the consent agenda?
Howdy, is Councilmember Ranga? That's what I was calling.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Is the chief there?
The chief is here, yes.
How you feeling, Mayor?
I am doing fantastic.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that.
Thank you. Because they still ended at 14 minutes, he's doing nothing, RCT going crazy.
Getting fat, okay.
The chief is available.
Getting fat, and ask the chief, especially now that we put out that mass order, if we've had any issue with that, because I know that I sent Terry out to throughout on both of them, so they were determined that they didn't fall under the mask protection order. So I want to know if we've had any issues with that, because that's something we're really going to push.
We've had complete compliance with that. Sorry?
It's okay.
We've had complete compliance with that. We haven't had any issues. The people that we have been called on, once we raise it to their attention, like here's what the orders show, we've had complete compliance so far.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Councilwoman Baca?
Thank you, Chief.
This is Councilwoman Baca. Chief, I just have a question regarding that, one of the calls on the call report from the PD on the sexual assault. Do we have any, leads on that?
I'm not 100% sure which one you're looking at, but the last one that we did work, we do have leads on that. There was further information that we feel we're going to be able to obtain from physical evidence that's been shipped to the lab. We're just awaiting those results. Of course, the labs statewide have also been shortened and or closed, and they have remote hours that they are working. So it's almost a waiting game at that point.
We have liberty to say if there was somebody that they knew for that sexual assault?
I'm not
Or is it a stranger?
at liberty to say that. That's still part of the investigation.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any more questions?
You gonna go down and ask if they have questions?
No, I think we're good on that. So, you ready for motion?
I am.
Real quick, before we go on, we are still looking into that Wednesday internet, pricing, Harvey.
Yes. That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
I'm calling for a motion.
No, I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as presented from, numbers 1 through 5.
Need a second?
I'll second.
Please say your name so we know who that was,
Councilman Art Corona.
and who provided the second.
Councilwoman Baca.
Thank you.
One of the things we're going to do a little different, since it's a virtual meeting, is we're going to have the city secretary do a roll call so that we don't have everybody trying to vote at the same time on top of each other. So when we go to vote for each item, Syra is going to do a roll call and give you an opportunity to say yes or no, so that we can, for the record, get it accurate and we don't have people talking on top of each other. So just that's be a procedure we follow for this meeting.
So state who moved, who seconded, got that?
Yes,
Now
sir.
I'll call for a vote.
Okay, now, Mr. Solana? Four?
Four.
Okay, Ms. Baca, you motioned, Mr. Thais?
Four.
Four, Arona first motioned, and Ms. Trujillo?
Four.
Four, thank you.
Motion
The
passed.
motion passed.
Motion passed. Now we go on to the next agenda item, which will be public hearing 2020-2021, first budget hearing, presented by Melanie Purcell, our finance director.
Right. I'm actually going to just run through the slideshow. City Manager Seth Sorensen put the presentation together, but unfortunately he's been sick and is not able to be here in person, but he is on the phone. And so I will kind of run through the slides. And Seth, if at any point you want to speak up or add some commentary, feel free to do so. But again, this is the first draft of our fiscal year 2021 budget. And to the point that was made earlier during public comment, I agree with everything you said, and hopefully we'll have some clarity through this process. But the challenge is that the state changed the calendar of when we have to publish things, and they told us to publish a number before we had the tax information from the appraisal district. So to some degree, we're just as much in the dark as the public is. So hopefully we can start providing some clarity as we get better information from the other entities. But just to review the current situation that we're in as a community, Pecos as a city is heavily dependent on sales tax. And we'll see how much of a percentage of our budget is driven by sales tax. But as we've said before, the result of both the oil field slowdown and the COVID impact on the economy, we're seeing some major reductions in sales tax revenue to the tune of 30 to 55% for the general fund. Additionally, hot fund or hotel occupancy tax is seeing a 50% reduction in receipts during this current time. And so being able to budget 12 to 16 months into the future, looking at what's happening today, and the numbers we have today are actually from activity 2 or 3 months ago, where we have a really good crystal ball, we just can't see into it clearly. But the bottom line is, with this significant reduction in revenue, we also have to respond by reducing expenses, which is going to reduce services and the level of service that we can provide in some areas. The budget approach that we've done so far, on the general fund specifically, prior to this time, 80% of the budget has been personnel costs, and we're trying to get that down to 50% of our budget being personnel. And so that is going to require some elimination of positions. We will be freezing vacant positions. There are some employees that are currently in the general fund that we will be reassigning to other funds and other responsibilities. And then as a result, the people that remain are going to have to share duties to keep the work flowing, because the demands on us as an organization haven't reduced, but we have to reduce our capacity to deliver those results. And so that will require some people to double up on their responsibilities. Beyond the staffing side, we're also reducing expenditures on equipment and vehicle purchases. We've reduced training budgets. We're limiting new capital expenditure and new projects. We've actually paused and put some existing projects on hold. And we're increasing our austerity measures. So if you come into City Hall during the day, don't be surprised to see a lot of lights off. Things like that. We've drastically changed how office supplies are obtained and used. So there's austerity measures as well. We've introduced the concept of indirect cost allocation and franchise fees from the utilities that use the public right-of-way. So before I move on, Seth, do you have anything to add at that point?
No, sir. Thank you for that. Not good.
Melanie, do you have anything to add yet at that point? Okay. All right. Moving on through, maintaining our fund balance or our reserves as is a huge strategic move for us. There are other organizations that will use fund balance to make up a shortfall. We don't believe that is sound fiscal policy, so we're trying to approach this budget by maintaining our fund balance as much as possible. And we also, as a strategic decision, want to try to maintain basic levels of service. So there are services we provide the community. We want to continue to provide those, but we ask everyone to recognize that it will increase the amount of time it takes for us to turn something around. For example, if you submit a building permit right now, you're probably going to get that turned around in 7 days. Once we go through this exercise, it's going to take longer to turn around a building review because we have fewer staff to do the review with. So you'll see a slowdown in how long it takes us to respond. Additionally, the progress that we make on active projects could also be impacted. Some of the things that we must continue to do as an organization and as a service is we have to continue to provide business licenses, food establishment licensing. There's things like that we have to do, and there's inspections that go along with those licenses that we have to maintain. We have various permits from the state of Texas for our operations that we have to maintain those activities. There's compliance with federal law and state law that we must continue to provide. And then there are debt obligations that we're committed to that we have to continue to fund. So as we looked at what and where to cut in our budget, there are certain things that we couldn't touch. There are some things that we could touch, but not drastically. And then there are some areas that get impacted more significantly through this approach. This screen is really, really hard to see because of how small it is, but the point is the 2021 total debt obligation for the community is $3.9 million. And so there's various debt instruments that have been done over the past, but the obligation that the city has to pay in this upcoming budget year is that $3,914,366.95. And it's spread across multiple funds, but that is an example of, you can't cut that out of the budget. We have to make those payments, and so that has been maintained in this proposed budget. Seth, anything to add on that note?
No, sir, thank you.
Okay. Looking at the general fund and where we anticipate the revenues to come from, at this point, sales tax makes up 31% of the revenue for our general fund, and property taxes comes in at 18%. So if you look at the volatility of your revenue source, if this is Bob's Plumbing, and Bob gets all of his revenue from oilfield customers, and the oilfield customers have gone away, Bob's going to take a big hit to his revenue. Well, as a city, we operate in the same concept, and so sales tax at 31% of our budget, and we're taking a very significant hit in sales tax revenues. That drop in revenue must be answered by a drop or a reduction in expenditures as well. There are other various revenue sources, but sales tax and property tax are the main ones. Go ahead, Melanie.
To provide a little context, when we had this conversation this time last year, sales tax was closer to 70%.
Okay. So we went from 70% of our revenue being sales tax to 31% of our revenue being sales tax. This large blue piece of the pie is transfers in. Because we're operating our internal service funds like fleet and IT, there are other funds that have to pay in for that service, so it's now being recognized as some revenue. And then I believe the indirect cost allocation in green is about 8%. What that allows us to do, for example, the finance department is not just a general fund activity. All the employees live and get paid in the general fund, but they do a lot of work in accounting for the utility fund or for the street fund. And so those funds are now having to pay for the service being provided by the finance department. And so that's what indirect cost allocation is as a concept. Looking at the expenditures for the general fund, 37% of our expenditures is salaries, and 14% is benefits. So if you add that up, right at 50% of our budget is people. Prior to this budget, that number has historically been 75 to 80% of our budget is people. And with the deep cuts we've had in revenue, you simply can't make up that by cutting operating expenses. It has to start cutting into the staffing levels that we maintain. In the green is debt service. So that is for the general fund, $3 million of our budget is debt service, which is 17% of the pie. And again, these numbers are kind of small, but the presentations, there are hard copies available if anybody wants that as well. But Seth, before we move away from the general fund, do you have anything to add?
I would just add that the 30% reduction in personnel costs is not solely from reduction in staffing. It does also reflect those indirect cost allocations, as well as moving the people that are filling those positions, which are anticipated to be cut, to other open positions throughout the city, especially among water, sewer, and sanitation.
One of the things that we were able to... Was there a question?
Yes, Councilman Ardona, with these reductions in what we're looking at they're gonna bring us close to or to that magic number that we need to be at, to be able to, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, survive the next few months of the thing ends.
Yeah, the budget we're presenting to you is balanced, and so we were able to get to that magic number, but we also have to admit that it will impact the level of service and how long service takes in some of our operational areas. But as Seth mentioned, go ahead, Art.
No, also just want to reiterate to the public that they need to understand that yes, we're still providing a service, but it may take a little longer than normal, you know, to get things done or to get things out there as they're requesting. Now, you know, I just ask the public, the taxpayers, to be patient with us at this time.
Agreed. All right. As Mr. Sorensen mentioned, there are, I believe, 4 or 5 positions in the reduction that have the opportunity to transfer over to one of the utility funds. There are positions that are vacant, and then there are positions that have been created that will allow them to land on their feet, if you will, and allow us to keep some of the, we've got a very solid staffing level and quality of people working for the organization right now, and so we want to be able to retain those and retain that skill and knowledge in the organization. And so we had some opportunities in the utility fund. So as we start looking at the utility fund revenues, this year in particular, this pie chart is going to look a little bit different than what you've seen in the past. But we're showing that 55% of our revenue comes from charges for service. And so what that means is the water and the sewer charges, that's where we get all of our money. But we're not saying that only half of our revenue comes from water and sewer charges. What is unique in this year is in blue, this $5.7 million, which is 42% of this particular budget, that is proceeds associated with the wastewater treatment expansion that we have ongoing. And there is some funding proceeds coming from the Texas Water Development Board that we have to recognize as funds we're receiving, because we're then going to recognize that those are funds that are going out the door. So our operating budget is not $13 million. Our operating budget is more closely aligned to the $7.5 million. But in this specific budget year, we're going to have a large expenditure on our wastewater treatment plant expansion. So we have to recognize that money coming in, and so that throws our percentages off. But year over year, we don't only get half of our money from charges and half of our money from debt. That is not what happens year over year. This is an anomaly. So looking at the expenditures for our utility fund, the dark blue is salaries. So in the utility fund, 51% of our budget is people under this particular year's pie chart. But again, remember that we have a large capital expenditure that's going to be happening as well. Actually, salaries is the light blue. I'm sorry, 10%. 10% of our budget is salaries at $1.3 million. But that big number is the capital. So that 51% of our budget this year is capital expenditures, the majority of which are associated with the wastewater treatment plant. So half the pie is operations, and half of this year's pie is that project at the wastewater treatment plant. 13% of the budget is basically the operations. That's us maintaining our system, fixing water leaks, replacing pipes, working on sewer. And so 10% is people, the other is actual operations costs. So utility fund is not as heavily centered on people as the general fund, but that's how the expenditure budget works out for utilities. Seth, after I've completely butchered that, do you want to come rescue me?
Oh, you're doing better than you think.
Okay. All right. Council on the phone, any questions on utilities before we move on to some of the more minor funds?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. Moving on to sanitation, this is our trash collection and the landfill operations. We're showing a budgeted revenue of $2,690,000. with a budget expenditure of $2,671,000. And so that includes the salaries and the operations of the landfill, the salary and operations of the trash collection. Those are two different operations. We have to collect the trash, and then we have to dispose of the trash. But one of the things that I'll point out that is new to us this year, on the revenue side, there is pass-through for the Odessa tipping fees. Because of the addition of the transfer station, we're going to begin to see a new expense line item of us hauling trash to Odessa to dispose of, and it will be offset in how we charge the companies that we have to haul for. And so there is, again, a slight surplus, $2,690,000 compared to $2,671,000. A sanitation fund is an enterprise fund just like any other business. Hopefully Bob's Plumbing has more revenue than he has expenditures. Same thing is true for our sanitation. We need to make sure we're in the black, if you will. Moving on to the airport fund. The airport that was given to the city by the Department of Defense a number of years ago, there are some hangar rentals that are provided. There is some funding from the TxDOT ramp grant that is used for operations. But then you have a large line item called use of fund balance. And it's listed that way because we don't really have any other operating revenues that are coming in from the operation of the airport. However, because of the mineral rights that are associated with that land when it was given to us by the federal government, all of the mineral royalties from that land have to go to the airport. And so they have a decent nest egg of cash that's in the bank that we earn money off of that is used as part of the expenditures for maintaining the airport. And so on the contract, on the expenditure side, our contract services are $200,000 because we hire a company to run the airport because that's their business and they're experts. And then there are other utilities and other services associated with it. But also we have $100,000 in capital outlay planned because as the airport ages, there are items that have to be replaced. For example, the runway lighting has aged and it's getting to the point now where if you're flying in at night, the lighting is not as visible as we would like. So we'll most likely take on a project to upgrade the runway lighting to make it safe for air traffic that's coming in after hours. They additionally have an indirect cost allocation because they are supported by general fund activities, and so there will be a small transfer there. The next fund is our street maintenance tax. As many of you know, a number of years ago there was a local election to take a portion of the sales tax and dedicate it to street maintenance. And this fund is also taking a hit to sales tax, just like everybody else that's dependent on sales tax. But we are projecting about $2 million in revenue. That's with the reduction that we anticipate. And so we have an expenditure of a little over or right at $2 million as well. And so we have street maintenance, which is the staff and the equipment. But then there's also some capital construction that goes on, allowing us to make improvements to existing streets. So there's $450,000 of capital outlay and $370,000 of supplies. If you will, the supplies is the asphalt and the emulsion and the rock that's used to do the maintenance on the streets. And the capital projects are resurfacing and maintenance activities as well. Seth, anything to add so far? I'll take that as a no. Hotel occupancy tax is paid by heads and beds at the local hotels. And as you can imagine, when the oil field was blowing and going, every hotel was at max occupancy. They were making money hand over fist, which means the state is then cutting us really nice checks and hot tax revenues. And we've seen a significant drop in that funding, by about 50%, if I remember correctly.
The numbers are actually coming in even lower now.
So we're projecting.
The numbers are coming in even lower now.
Okay, even lower, okay.
Yeah, so it's more than 50% in their most recent numbers. So we're conservatively projecting 1.8 or $1,825,000 of revenue to the hot fund. And the baseball complex that the community took on a number of years ago is under construction right now and will be in operations during this upcoming budget year. So we had to budget for the operation of that. And so the salaries and the benefits that you see are new expenditures, but that's because we have to operate that facility to host baseball tournaments, but also non-baseball events as well. We should be able to get a lot of use and a lot of events happening for the community through that facility that are above and beyond just baseball. But that is a representation of the expenditure side. We think there's going to be about $1.8 million in expenditures and $1,825,000 in revenues. So again, we are proposing a balanced budget on the hot taxes. Finally, in summary, looking at everything, general fund, again, we're projecting $17.6 million in revenue, $17.596 in expenditures, and so that has us in the black by $4,800. I'm going to tell you that's not a great margin, and some of that is because we're trying to project what's going to happen 12 to 16 months into the future with incomplete data today. And so being as conservative as we can, that's where we look like. To finish off the summer, utilities is $13,590,000 in revenue, $13,581,000 in expenditures. Sanitation, $2,690,000 in revenue, $2,671,000 in expenditures. Airport, $331,000 compared to $331,000. It's a wash. Street maintenance tax, $2,025,000 compared to $2,014,000, and then hotel tax, $1,825,000 compared to $1,802,000. So each of the funds that are required to be in the black, we're bringing a budget forward that has them in the black. Airport is allowed to be a wash, and so that's the summary. So before I get to conclusions, Seth, do you have anything to add? And then we'll start opening it up to questions.
I think I would like to add a few comments after you've finished the conclusions, please.
Okay, all right. So conclusion points is that the proposed budget has no room for error. We are trying to predict as conservatively as we can because there's a lot of unknowns and there's a lot that can change in the next 12 to 16 months. And so we are not being pie in the sky. We're not being overly optimistic in what we think is going to happen. We're trying to be as realistic and conservative as we can in budgeting revenues, which has led us to very deep cuts on the expenditure and the operations side. I would love to be wrong and us actually see revenue come in higher than what we're projecting, but we're not willing to bet the farm on that. And so we're being very conservative. If current trends continue, right now it appears, knock on wood, that we may have kind of hit the bottom of the trench. But again, crystal ball does not say with clarity that we're going to start climbing out. We could level off and start a new decline. We simply don't know. But if the current declining trend continues down, we may have to come back and revise the budget down again in response to that reality. We are making limited use of reserve funds for capital expenditures and strategic expenditures, but not for ongoing recurring operations costs. We're strongly recommending not make any adjustments up until we see at least 4 straight months of positive trend. And so we're adopting a very deeply cut budget right now. It is our recommendation that if we look up and we have a month of improved sales tax, we recommend restraint to not, okay, well then we can start adding stuff back in. We would recommend at least 4 consecutive months of increasing revenue numbers before we start playing with any projections. And finally, we are bringing you balanced budgets as are required by law. Melanie, do you have anything to add before, all right, Seth, we hand it off to you, sir.
Well, Mr. Listenby, thank you for a job well done in presenting that. I apologize for not being there myself. I would just like to reiterate, and I know it's been said several times, but it can't be punctuated enough. This is a balanced budget, but it is razor thin on the margins. And this budget has been an exercise in balancing optimism with realism for where we think we might be going and where we hope we will be going. But it is razor sharp. If you look at the differences between revenues and expenditures, there's not a lot of gap there. This budget does not have fat. There's not really places to cut unless we start going deeper in our level of service and our personnel. And we certainly don't want to do that. We have great people that work for the city who are very dedicated. And so we hope that it does come to that. And I would just like to echo something that Mr. Lisenby said before, and that I'm sure that Ms. Purcell will state in the next hearing about the property tax rate. This budget is based off of the assumption that we would bring in the same amount of property tax as we did in current year, but we are waiting to see what will happen with valuations from the appraisal district. And so if valuations have gone up, that actually means that our property tax cents per 100 will actually go down slightly in order to make that be the equivalent revenue raise. And so we will hopefully have more information on that as we get the final numbers in from the appraisal district. But again, as Mr. Lisenby stated, we did advertise the max rate because that's the only way to provide council with any kind of flexibility in their decisions of what to do with that tax rate. It does not lock the city in, and the council is not obligated to adopt that max tax rate by any means. Again, thank you, Mr. Lisenby, and I apologize for not being there in person.
Well, you've been sick and we didn't want you to share, so we appreciate your contribution. And Mayor, I will say, or Mayor Pro Tem, we've got to have a public hearing for the budget, but I want to remind everybody, this particular hearing is for the budget and the numbers that have been presented. The next item is a hearing specifically on the tax rate and what can or cannot be adopted. And so we need to invite the public to come and speak. We would ask that this hearing be on the budget and the budget philosophy, and the next item in the next hearing that we're about to have is specifically on the tax rate and its adoption. So, Mr. Tez, I'll give it back to you.
I have one question on that. Do you think there's a possibility we might have to forego any capital improvements plans for the following year?
My answer is going to be that it depends on where that project is funded from. So, for example, Ms. Purcell may shoot me as an oversimplification, but the various funds are different buckets of money. And so the general fund is its own 5-gallon bucket, or in this case, 3-gallon bucket of money. And so if there are capital project needs that we have in the future that are funded from that bucket of money, yes, those have been frozen. For example, we had money budgeted to complete the remodel of City Hall and make an improved city council chambers for these meetings. That project has been placed on hold, and those funds have been pulled from the project. So there are capital projects that are needed, that are funded with the general fund bucket of money, that have been stopped and are on hold. Water and sewer as an enterprise fund is a completely different bucket of money and has a different source of revenue. There are and continue to be capital projects planned for our utility system that still are being planned and are still actively being designed and are planned for construction, because the utility fund doesn't receive sales tax and doesn't receive property tax. It's just charges for service. And so capital projects associated with that bucket of money are still ongoing. So it depends on what the funding source for that project is as to whether it still lives or is on hold.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. President.
Any,
Information is being
And
put out there.
Councilman,
go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Councilman, if I may answer that.
Yes, sir.
Seth, go ahead.
If I may answer that, we don't have any capital projects planned out of the general fund for this current year. It definitely doesn't mean that there's not needs. It just means that there's not those funds available. On the utility side especially, there is an immediate need for the wastewater treatment plant improvements, and we are working through Texas Water Development Board to secure that funding. But for any remaining projects, we will probably be doing a wait and see on the progress throughout the fiscal year. In other words, we won't start those projects until we're sure that we're going to be on good footing to be able to pay for them.
Councilwoman Baca?
Councilwoman Baca, I do have a question regarding the employees that will be moved to a different account, paid out of a different account.
Sure.
When our funding is, when it gets healthy, are we gonna move them back to what account they were on, or are we gonna leave them with their new funding?
I'll take the first stab at this, and then Seth, you can correct me if I'm wrong. The plan and the intent right now is for those positions that are transferred in the future, if that position that they left is recreated, they get first call at taking that position back, or first right of refusal, if you will. So if Bob is in the general fund and he gets moved to the water fund, and 2 years in the future, his old position is created again, Bob has first shot to go back to that if he wants it, or he may choose to stay where he's at. So the short answer is yes, they will have the first option to move back into that general fund position when it's recreated in the future.
Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead, Art.
Question, you mentioned something, if we get about 3 months of positive,
4. We're recommending 4 months.
4 months, okay. During that time, or at that time, I think, hindsight being what it is, you can always hindsight yourself to death, but we were gunning and running, and everything was good, but we didn't anticipate this. Nobody did. So maybe we need to devise a plan to start setting money aside. And I'm pretty sure you all have thought about it, but I'm just voicing it, I guess. So we need to start setting an account or setting money aside just in case. Instead of running and gunning like we were doing, which we were trying to do good for the town of Pecos. But I think now, lesson learned to me and my part. My opinion is we need to set some money aside to cover situations like these.
I'll invite Ms. Purcell to speak to this, but I know one of the concepts we've talked about, because of how dependent we are on sales tax, and that's a volatile revenue source, standard is 25% fund balance target. We've talked about a higher target to be in a better position. Can you see who that is? Go ahead, Ms. Purcell.
The standard practice from the Government Finance Officers Association is actually 2.5 months, so about 17%. We've been recommending 25% in the general fund, in the sanitation fund, in streets, in those areas where there's some volatility, in order to have some backing, some support, recognizing cash flow is much more effective. However, in this type of circumstance, given how dependent Pecos is on sales tax, we definitely would recommend many cities in the state of Texas, particularly dependent on oil field activity, Houston, some of the others, but certainly the smaller towns in that area are looking at about 50%.
I gotta stop it. I'm not hearing it's coming in and going out.
We've step a little closer.
Okay, so what I'm speaking to is that some other cities in Texas have now been embracing a 50% fund balance in their general fund to accommodate the volatility. Some other options exist for setting aside additional capital reserves, to have a reserve for, in fact, a budget reserve, a budget stability fund, in which you could set aside a specific goal. The last community I worked in, actually, we did have 2 to 3 separate funds designated for physical emergencies or natural disasters, also for volatility because it was heavily dependent on tourism, and then also a strong substantive fund balance. The state of Texas allows all of those options, and certainly it depends a lot on the comfort level of the council as well as the comfort level of the community in how those funds are either restricted or set aside and dedicated. So that would also be options in actually not just a fund balance, but in how that fund balance is restricted or set aside, or what parameters would allow it to be tapped, or what parameters it could be allowed to be used for.
Art, did that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other council members on the phone? Mayor?
Howdy, this is Mayor. What are we looking at? What is the maximum tax rate that we can set?
Well, again, using what information we had and following state law, the rollback rate is 3.5%. And so whatever our effective rate would be, and 3.5% on top of the effective rate is, I believe, what we published as the ceiling. And so that was 61 cents and change?
61.95.
61.95. And so because we don't have final valuations, again, and I think state law changed it. It used to be called the effective rate, and the effective rate was what rate generates the same revenue as last year, and that's what we wrote a budget using the effective rate, but we don't have tax valuations to know what that final number is going to be. And so we published the 3.5% because that sets the ceiling and the max at what council can consider when we final adopt in August.
Mayor, this is Rob.
Yes.
And the governor, under the emergency declarations for COVID, has said that cities can go back to the old 8% maximum if they want to during the emergency.
But we published and set it at the 3.5.
Right, I know. I'm just saying that was legally we were able to go higher if we had to because of the emergency.
But again, we are not recommending that.
Thank you, sir.
Right. No, I mean nobody wants that kind of raise. I'm just passing that off.
Did that answer your question, Mayor?
Yes, thank you.
Any other council members on phone have questions or comments?
Okay, so just, Councilman Roman again, just to make it clear, we're setting the rate at 161, just for the budget itself in a sense, but we're going to stick with 60 cents, correct? Am I wrong to say that?
Yep, no, that's not correct. The budget we've presented assumes the effective tax rate. And so if when we get the final, and I talked to the appraisal, or I talked to the county's tax person today, they think the certified tax roll will be out July 25th. And if they hit that mark, we've already had 3 public hearings, or we'll have 2 public hearings before we get the certified roll, and we'll have 2 hearings in August. But our budget that we presented is asking for the effective rate. And so if appraisals go up, then the rate we adopt will actually be less than the 60 cents. If for some reason appraisals go down, then the effective rate may be 60, it may be a little higher, but the tax bill that the citizen gets will be the same bill they got last year. We're not asking the citizens to pay anything more this coming year than what their tax bill was this year. But we can't calculate that rate until we get the tax roll.
Okay, because that's the confusing part that people are seeing
Yeah.
and asking about.
And so the language that we used in the newspaper ad is part of what's required by the state of Texas. And so it is confusing, but it's the language we're given by the state to use.
I think that would be a good idea for somebody to get on that radio program and address this issue.
I nominate you.
You're better at it than I am. You beat me to the punch, but you know what?
Any other comments or questions on the phone? Mr. Tejas, I turn it over back to you.
Do we have to ask the public if they want?
Public comment, yes, you need to open the public comment and allow people to come up, state their name for the record, and they've got 3 minutes.
So I'm going to open up the public hearing. Do we have anybody from the public who wants to say something?
Well, I kind of do, and oh, sorry, Anitra Bradfield.
Name, please.
Anitra Bradfield. So I kind of get what you're saying on some of that. So my question is on that is, does the city council do you have a rate or a feeling of what you were wanting, or on the budgeting and then proposed on this?
It has never been my intention, I'm pretty sure the rest of the council, to raise taxes. That's the easiest way you lose your job, is to raise taxes.
No, I mean, I know that they said that because this is kind of, I'm going to say figurative, because he says it's not totally calculated, but my thing is based on the numbers that they did give you to be able to publish what you published, my point is I want to know what were you thinking? Were you thinking that is a good rate, or were you thinking maybe not? Or I just kind of want to know what you were thinking, even though, yeah, you had to put something out.
Right.
My point is really in your heart, what were you thinking? I guess.
In my heart, I was thinking of either keeping it where we were last year, or if we could lower it just to help, like what President Trump did and did the tax cuts that help businesses and all that. So in my opinion, or in my thinking, I wanted it either to stay the same, or if we could lower it, would be even better. But like I said, I'm not no tax person.
Anybody else?
Any response over the phone? Did everybody hear the question, and is there any response over the phone?
Didn't quite hear the question.
All right, so the question was asked is, they've heard from staff and staff's recommendation, but from the council's perspective, what are your intentions, or what do you want to see happen with the tax rate moving forward?
Personally, I think we should keep it at the 60, but right now nobody can afford any more taxes. I know we need it to operate, but we should have to do what we can to keep it where it's at. We cut, I know, a lot, and we're fixing to do more, which is not very happy with the direction we're going. To save money, but things have to be done. Sometimes hard decisions have to be made in order to continue providing service, but this is one that I will vote against. And so that's just my opinion on it, my thoughts.
Because I feel that the public would be more, I'm going to say pleased, at least if they were kept the same, especially for this next time, because we have had such a big, like I said, these big drops, and it's plummeting, and that's what I'm saying. At least if it's kept the same, just like me, I still know, okay, this is how I can make it. Okay, this is how I can do it. If I have to go to a food bank, or I have to do this to be able to accommodate this, and to, okay, do I call my or institute for my mortgage, whichever it may be, and say, okay, can you defer my payments through, that's what I'm saying. At least if you leave it the same, you're not hurting the people. And then if things get better, then if that something comes into factor, then take it. I just think don't plunge in is what I'm saying. I think we're plunging into the shallow end, and this is not good. We're going to crash and burn. And I do have another question, because I saw the sanitation thing. I do have a question on the John Deere backhoe lease. We are leasing a backhoe?
So we actually took on 4 backhoes, 3 this year, 1 several years ago. These are lease purchases, so they are
leased to
financed. Yes, and so in order to be able to replace all the equipment that was needed, because it hadn't been replaced in so long, they were failing. We were paying much higher rental rates. We went ahead and entered into a low interest payment plan so we could pay them off in 5 years.
So it is an actual, you're purchasing. It's
It is
not
purchased.
technically like a lease.
Yeah,
Well,
not
it's not
like
rental.
leasing a car.
Oh, because I was sitting there going, are you freaking kidding me? So I just, because like I said, I mean, I would have to go home and like redo some of them, like look at some of this stuff, and I see that yes, you are trying to do some cutting, but like I said, just.
A charger.
I didn't know if I can understand. Okay. And so my other thing, and so.
At 3 minutes.
We have 3 minutes.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've got to sit down,
But to answer one of your questions, our intentions have never been to raise taxes. We're in going through a pandemic and an economic downfall. It affects everybody. It affects you, everybody in here. So we're not trying to raise taxes, and we're not going. When one of the Bush presidents said, "I will not raise taxes," we will not raise taxes.
It's just easier to maintain at this point.
You got to hear from us. I
Yeah.
understand. I understand.
Jesus, can you go ahead and unmute Art
You
again?
won't let me here do it.
All right. Art, hope you can hear me. We muted your mic. When you're clear, you can unmute yourself and speak back in.
Star 6.
Star 6? Okay. All right.
I will now close the meeting for the regular budget workshop for 2020, and we'll reopen public hearings.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Mayor.
And I will see you with your graduation fireworks is up. For some reason, I can see that and feel it more than I know it. So, you know, in a sense, we have to prepare residents that they need to understand what it means by graduation stopping, because they're the same, if they go up. I don't think a lot of people understand that that's going to have to do a lot with the tax freeze and how it's going to get set. I understand that the council will have the option on one way or the other. And again, I think it needs to be proposed, and it has been proposed. But I got a feeling that these rates drop, people are going to get increased. So, you know, that's something that we also make sure that people understand that that is possible. That's the only comment I have.
Thank you, Mayor. And I will now reopen the public hearing.
We closed the public hearing, and so are there any other comments or questions from the council before we move on to the next item?
Any more questions, council? Or comments?
Move on to
I will now open up public
no,
hearing.
we gotta let
Oh,
Ms. Purcell present first, and then we open public hearing.
introduce Ms. Melanie Purcell.
Okay, so Melanie Purcell, Finance Director. I just wanted to clarify for everyone. So there's been a lot of changes with Senate Bill 2. When they passed SB 2, they pretty much chucked the rules out, but not quite, on how to calculate property taxes. So all the nomenclature, all the names that they've used have now changed. What has to be published, and I'm going to apologize up front, I used the wrong form to publish it. The calculations are correct, but the publication itself, there's more information that will be published this week because they expect us to rephrase it and use a different name. But what they're asking for is us to utilize what's called a no new revenue rate and then an effective rate. And the voter approval tax rate is that effective rate. What that means is that up to 3.5% above last year's tax revenues could be passed by the city council without a voter approval. That is the 6195717.
that rate. We published that rate, as has been mentioned, because we had a speculative valuation. That is the only reason that number is published. What is intended within the budget and within the conversations today has been the no new revenue rate. Until we get that valuation, I can't tell you exactly what that is. So it's the combination of the two is what generates the tax bill. We have to publish that number regardless. That number is also made up of two components. And what has happened is that the state has changed part of the way we calculate that. We must calculate them separately as well as together. The two amounts are what's called the M&O, maintenance and operations, which is how we fund daily activities, and the INS, which is interest and sinking, and that's for debt service. There is a significant change last year and this year for the town of Pecos City. When we went through and started reading all of the language associated with recent debt issues, we noticed that not all of them were being calculated within that debt rate. So that shifted operating dollars to debt, and that is to comply with our own debt issues and state law. So it looks a little weird, and if you look at last year, you look at the year before that, and then you look at this one, you're like, what is wrong with these people? Honest, we're not crazy, but we're trying very hard to make sure that the city is abiding by the law, as well as its own rules. We will not recommend to council, unless something drastically changes, anything above the no new revenue rate. It will look a little different because we must calculate the M&O rate under the 3.5%. We calculate the debt as is. The two combined cannot exceed the no new revenue rate or the voter approval rate with the 3.5%. What happens is when you have more debt, you must, by definition, reduce your operating. It's not open for debate. So that's where you see a lot of that shift between transfers from other funds and the support, because what had been issued were what were called combined debt. And those combined debt meant that you had property tax and water and sewer, or property tax and sales tax from the streets. When you combine them, that's fine, that's perfectly legal, but you have to ensure that you're reporting them to the taxpayers correctly on that tax rate. What it comes down to is what will be published coming up, I just have to fill out the new form, is the no new revenue rate with how it's calculated, the voter approval rate with how it's calculated. We will disclose the estimated unencumbered fund balances so that citizens can see what those fund balances are. And we will also report those the bond issues, those debts that exist, so that citizens can see what is comprising that debt structure and what that debt rate is. That is intended to be as transparent as possible, which really was the stated purpose of SB2. So yes, it's to cap revenues and to make governments stay within a certain increase level. We had never even considered coming back for the 8%. So the 3.5% is actually quite in line with what many other states have gone to. California's at 1.5%, Colorado's at 5%, Michigan's at inflation rate or 5%, so the lower of. So it's well within what's expected. We don't want to come in above what we collected last year. So that is the intent. Again, the law changed when the valuations were to be complete. That has not been met. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like. The adoption of the budget and the adoption of the tax rate takes place August 13th. If there is some other weird anomaly, there may have to be another public hearing. But given that the city's intent and the stated intent of the council is to not have additional revenue, to go with that no new rate, no new taxes, no new revenues rate, we would not have to have another. If the council were to choose to in fact go to the voter approved rate or even go to referendum, it would have to have another public hearing, in addition to the one on July 25th. Excuse me, July 23rd, get my dates right. So, any questions?
Council over the phone, do you have any questions for Ms. Purcell?
Okay.
Again, remind everyone, this public hearing is about the tax rate. If you come up, speak your name for the record, and again, we have the 3 minutes. So it's to you, Mr. Tess.
So now we'll open up the public hearing on the tax rate. Is there any takers?
I hear you.
Please state your name.
So off the tax rate, and I know you.
State your name again for the record, I'm sorry.
My name's Redfield.
There.
So I know that you said there's a block in some of the margin. Is there any way that, I know this isn't going to be huge, but little is better than nothing. Is there a way to like increase like bulk dumping at the landfills to help like with a little bit more revenue to cover some of the other things to help with the tax too, so it's not as bad? Or, I mean, has that been like kind of looked into?
So what we have done, and I
It's just because I don't have paper, you know what I mean?
yeah, and normally
It's harder.
we don't respond, but with council's permission, I think it would be
Yes,
appropriate.
yes.
What we have done is actually broken out the sanitation fund.
Okay.
And broken out some of these other funds that
Okay.
used to be all held within the general fund.
They work
so
together.
that those expenses aren't subsidized by taxes.
Okay.
So we've actually took that action this current year.
Okay.
And now those activities are paying back to the general fund for the services.
Okay.
So it's actually equalized it quite a bit.
Okay. So.
It really does come down to the fact that Pecos is so dependent on sales tax.
Yeah, and
But
that's-
it's actually pulled some of that burden out already. And
so
we
it
continue to push
has
Mhm.
done on that.
Yes.
And one of the things that other cities have gotten in trouble for, and I may defer to our attorney, but there are other cities in Texas that have tried, they don't want to raise property taxes. So for example, they would raise the water rate and then send that money to the general fund, and then they go to court and get in trouble for unconstitutional taxes. And so you can't raise a revenue somewhere else and send it to the general fund as a way to avoid taxes. You
Yeah.
can't do that. And so, Mr. Palmer.
Most cities in Texas have maybe a third of their budget for sales tax and a half to 2/3 of their budget for property tax. So Pecos has been lucky that we've had such a boom and it's brought us such a big influx of money from sales tax. But, you know, that's, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. So we're dying this year, you know, hopefully next year it'll start coming back. But we just have to deal with these ups and downs. And the finance director was talking about some ways to mitigate it some in the future. So.
Wish I had more paperwork.
Thank you.
Mayor and council, do you have any questions?
Mr. Purcell, what's the schedule for the upcoming meetings and hearings as we move forward?
So we have tried to attempt to schedule everything on regular council nights. So we will have another public hearing on July 23rd, and then the action of the council would be at the first meeting in August. By state law, we must have an adopted budget by August 15th, so you only have a 2-day window after that council meeting. So we'd like to have that be the case. If council were to decide that they wanted to have additional conversation outside of a regular council meeting, we can schedule additional meetings. I'm going to work with Ms. Nichols to ensure that we have all of the posting and the information. Certainly we can meet with anybody who wants to. We can do additional meetings. We have done other activity in the past to try and broadcast the information. At this point, I will admit, because it has been so fluid, it has not been as concrete as we would have liked.
Can we close the public hearing?
I will now close the public hearing for 2021, the first tax rate hearing. Thank you, Mr. Purcell.
Any questions or comments from those on the phone before we move forward? Okay.
Nothing.
We have on the next item, the agenda will be
Number 3 starts at the bottom.
discuss, consider a resolution 2007-01R approving the submission of an application to the CARES Act grant. Mr. Purcell.
Thank you, Melanie Purcell, Finance Director. And I first want to start with major thanks, many thanks to our City Secretary, Sarah Nichols, for preparing the resolution. Recognizing that we were doing a little bit of juggling and we still needed to get this done. She took the lead on bringing the documents forward. What the federal government did at the onset of the pandemic was set aside certain funds that were allowed and passed through. So each state got funding. Certain specific entities within each state got direct funding, and then the rest of us kind of got what's left. But within the state of Texas, they decided that it would be based on a pro rata allocation, that you would get an automatic allocation if you applied for it. And so this is the resolution that in effect says, hey, we want our money. We will also be pursuing any opportunity and all opportunity, both through this funding source and other ones, to get reimbursement of actual expenditures. So PPEs, the personal protection equipment, the sanitizing the jail, sanitizing City Hall, any extra activities that we've had to do. We needed to actually sterilize police vehicles, things of that nature, as well as potentially being able to be reimbursed for lost employee time. One of the components of this is by federal law, we must pay full pay for an employee who has a diagnosis. We must pay for anybody on quarantine. We must also provide for anybody who is caring for a family member or a household member who has been diagnosed. It's a wonderful support, however, it does come at a price. And so we will be pursuing reimbursement from the federal government for that, but this is the step to get the direct allocation. And it is based on population. So it is through the state Department of Emergency Management through the state of Texas. It is, however, federal funding, so it will come under our reporting for that.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do they tell us how much?
They do, yes. They dictate that. I believe the amount that they cited was $113,000, and it's in here $113,641. So it beats poking me out of the shark stick.
But we have to.
Yes, we have to ask for it.
Ask for it.
And I rephrase it. Staff cannot ask for this. It must be by the governing body.
I believe, hopefully, Councilman Arona, you can hear me. If you'll push *6 on your phone, that should unmute you and allow you to speak back into the meeting as well. So, no public hearing, so you can just ask for comments and questions a moment. So that's the end of the presentation. So now, is there any questions or comments from the council in person or on the phone? No public hearing.
Do we have any comments from the council? Mayor?
We said, Melanie, anybody can apply? Looking at the numbers.
Each local government can apply.
I see some of these people are getting a good amount if they apply for it.
Yes, so we definitely don't want to leave money on the table.
Definitely. The whole council approves.
I make the motion that we approve resolution 20-07-01R, approving the submission of an application for the CARES Act grant as presented by our finance director, Ms. Melanie Purcell.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second. This is Councilwoman Trujillo.
Motion has been made by Councilman Sandaya to accept resolution 20-07-01R, approving the submission of an application for the CARES grant, and seconded by Councilman Trujillo. All those in favor, signal please.
Starts with a roll call.
Okay, so now roll call. Mr. Saldana, for or against?
For.
Okay. Ms. Baca, for or against?
For.
Mr. Arona, for or against?
I think he's still muted at this point. And we can't unmute him.
Mr. Arona on the phone. Yes.
I've tried to hit take star 6, take this off star 6. I've done, but my answer is yes, 4.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Arona. Ms. Trujillo, for or against?
Hang him up and then have him call back in. She's 4.
Thank you. Okay, so, and Mr. Thayes?
4.
Okay, so
You
that's...
still have Art on the phone?
Yes.
When we finish up, if he'll call back into the meeting, we can get him back in the queue.
Okay, and so that is 5-4 and the motion passed.
Motion passes. Any more questions? Okay, we'll go on to the next item, please. Update on the P&Z Board of Adjustments on the State Theater. Mr. Donnie McKinney, Chief Building Official.
Councilman Ted said, Donnie McKinney, Chief Building Official. We had a Board of Adjustments meeting on Tuesday. The request was for the State Theater. I'm sure you've all been by there and seen the steel that's on the outside of it. Well, that was all built in the right of way. So I'm asking you to stop working on it, which you did, and come to the Board of Adjustments to see if they'd allow him to leave that there. The board voted to not let him leave it there. So that should be coming down fairly soon. They're a governing body in themselves, so the council doesn't have to take any action on it. I just wanted to let y'all know how the meeting went and that that ramp and awning. He came to me yesterday and asked if he could still do the awning. That wasn't part of the board, so he may have to come back and ask that. But the ramp is definitely a no. And I think most likely the whole canopy is going to be a no.
Can you tell us what they're trying to build? I'm just curious. Everybody else is too.
They're trying to do like a theater bar type thing. You can go in there and have drinks, watch a movie. And their plan was to set tables up on that balcony so you could sit outside and have a meal. So, and from talking to Mr. Coonwire yesterday, he still wants to do the bar and stuff in the building, but all the stuff on the outside is going to have to go along. So, I'll entertain any questions you have about it. That's pretty much the gist of it.
So they weren't in compliance with the outside audience?
They were not. They did get a building permit for it, but there have been so many changes I didn't realize they were building it in the right of way. Because where that is actually the city's property.
Right away.
So when I drove by there and saw what they were doing, I was like, this isn't going to work. So I asked them to stop, which they did, and to take it before the Board of Adjustments before we went any further. And they said no on it. So.
Any questions from the council?
Did he have an exception?
I'm sorry?
Did he have an exception?
Donnie, could he get an exception to leave the army on the right of way?
No, that was, well, I'm going to contact the board and see if they're interested in hearing leaving the awning. From the meeting, I didn't feel there was any support for that, but I'll reach out to the members of that board and see if they're interested in entertaining leaving the awning without the ramp. But my indication from the meeting was that they're not really interested in entertaining that.
Okay.
Any other questions from the council on the phone?
This is Don again, just checking in to see if y'all hear me.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Any more questions, council? Mayor?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Mayor, Council, thank you very much.
Thank you, Don. Thanks for the update. Item 5, discuss, consider extending Noble Energy Jersey Levy 17-7 5SH 5H, excuse me, and Wider 311 or 3H, excuse me, need my glasses. Drilling permits. Sarah Nichols.
Okay, Mayor and Council, in your packets, you all have a copy of the existing permit that Noble had pulled a few months, last year sometime for 2 drilling rigs. And they reached out to me sometime about 2 weeks ago, and they let me know that due to the current pandemic, they have not been able to work as effectively as they have in the past. So they are asking that the council grant an extension through the end of April of 2022. I asked if they expected to take that long, even if it started to pick back up and they got to work on it. They said no, that's just kind of giving them a little bit of leeway because we do not know how long this pandemic is going to last. But their hopes are that as soon as they can get going, they're going to get it done. They do not want to prolong it. They're just trying to give themselves that leeway, but they do want to get it done as soon as possible.
When does their current permit end?
September of this year.
How do you feel, Mayor and Council?
Councilman Orona, I don't have a problem with it.
Councilwoman Trujillo, I think we should extend it.
I agree.
Councilman Baca?
I don't have a problem with it.
Mayor Pro Tem, I make a motion that we approve extending Noble Energy Leak Jersey Living 17-758 and wider to 8 building permits as presented by our City Secretary, Sarah Nichols.
I second.
Motion has been made by Councilman Orona to extend Noble Energy Jersey Lily 17-7 SH and wider 3H. To extend the building permits until what date?
And April 30th of 2022.
Till April 30th of 2022.
Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and start the roll call. Mr. Saldana, you were for. So Councilwoman Baca, for or against? Councilman Orona, you've motioned. Councilwoman Trujillo, for or against?
For.
And Mr. Pro Tem Reyes, for or against? Okay, the motion passed. Thank you.
Thank you. So motion passes.
Number 6.
To extend Noble Energy the permits as presented. The roll call has been taken, so.
Yep, I'm good. Thank you.
Item 6, excuse me. Discuss consider ordinance 20-06-01 approving Texas Gas Service use of financial instrument for the 2020-2021 heating season. Second reading. Sarah Nichols.
Mayor and Council, in your packet you have a copy of ordinance 20-06-01. It's the same one that I presented at last council meeting. It is just allowing Texas Gas Services to go out and purchase financial instruments that will help them find the lowest, most cost-effective rates to provide our residents with in the winter months and help keep everyone's bills down as best as they can.
Any questions, Mayor, Council?
No, sir.
Do I hear a motion?
I make the motion that we approve 20-06-01 approving Texas Gas Service use of financial instruments for 2020-2021 heating season. Second reading is presented by Sarah Nichols, City Secretary.
Do I have a second?
Councilman Orona, second.
Motion has been made by Councilman Saldana to accept the second reading of ordinance -20-06-01 approving Texas Gas Service use of financial instruments for the 2020-2021 heating season, and seconded by Councilman Saldana.
And I'll start the roll call. Ms. Baca, for or against?
For.
Ms. Trujillo, for or against?
For.
Mr. Reyes, for or against? The motion passed. Thank you.
And Item 7, discuss, consider conveyance or sale of Lot 4, Block 13, North Pecos addition to the 4B Economic Development Corporation, presented by Howdy Lisenby, Assistant City Manager.
Mayor, Council, Howdy Lisenby. We've been given a request by the Pecos Economic Development Corporation. They have a potential project near 2nd and Peach Street, and there is a property adjacent to the lot they're working with that is currently owned by the city that would make their potential project more attractive and more successful. And so they are requesting that the city convey or give that lot to the EDC so that they can roll it into the economic development package that they're working on to make that project more viable. And so that is the request. It is a single lot that is held by the town of Pecos City. It is currently undeveloped, and the city has no plans for its use, and there's really not anything that it benefits us to hold on to it. We'll entertain any questions.
You say it's on 2nd and Peach?
Yes, sir.
Is this Councilwoman Baca, is that the one with the little asterisk sign?
Yes.
That's a small property.
Yeah, it's a standard residential lot, but it's an area that's zoned commercial. And so EDC owns the little, probably, I'm guessing 50 by 150 is a standard lot. It's probably 50 by 150 that EDC owns. And the one we have is also 50 by 150. And so if we were to convey that to them, it creates a bigger lot that's more attractive for commercial development. Seth, this is Howdy. Do they already, I think they already have a prospective project in mind, don't they?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay.
So would you agree with the conveyance or sale? I'm just curious. What is your opinion?
Typically, we convey and give to the EDC.
Do I hear a motion from the council?
This is Councilwoman Baca. The land that the EDC owns is north of that or south of that?
On the, I can't tell which is, I'm going to assume the top of the map is north because I can't tell how this is laid out. So it would be the one immediately to the south towards 2nd Street is the one that the EDC owns. The next page of that packet is a printout from the appraisal district that shows lot 4288. That's the one that EDC owns. We own 14997, which is next to it, and that's the one they're requesting that we convey to them.
Any questions by the mayor or council?
This is Councilwoman Baca, and we don't currently have any residential homes next door or anything like that. So they found that they want to do something commercial.
I don't know exactly what the project is, but I believe this area is zoned commercial, so I don't think they could build a residential there. But a single residential lot is probably hard to do a commercial project. I don't know what their prospective project is, but because of the zoning, I don't think they would be able to do a residential project there.
And also, Councilwoman Baca, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if this picture is current, but if the one across is oil changing place, then isn't there a lot of, I guess, debris, I would say, on that property currently?
It appears there may be an old foundation or something there, but we've got Donnie McKinney, our chief building official, is coming up. Do you know the condition of that lot currently?
It does have a small foundation there. I think there was a house there at one time, but that whole area is now commercial. The Dollar General that they're building is right, basically across the street.
Okay.
So they can't build a residential house there anyway because it's commercial now.
Thank you, Donnie.
Okay, so if we can make it to the CEDC, any work that has to be done on it will be out of their pocket, correct?
It would be their pocket or a potential developer, yes.
Okay.
Do I hear a motion then, Council?
Mr. Councilman, I'll make a motion that we approve the conveyance of Block 4, Block 13, North Pecos addition to the Pecos 4B Economic Development Corporation, as presented by Housing Ministry as the city manager.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Councilwoman Baca, I'll second.
Motion has been made by Councilman Arona to accept the conveyance of Lot 4, Block 13, North Pecos addition to the Pecos 4B Economic Development Corporation, and seconded by Councilwoman Baca.
Okay, I'll do a roll call now. Mr. Santana, for or against?
4.
Okay. Ms. Trujillo, for or against?
4.
Okay, and Mr. Thales, for?
4.
Okay, the motion passed.
Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is agenda items. Deadline by Councilman Arthur Orona.
Yes, I've been curious about this one since we started. This will deal about having an item that's 2 weeks prior to the following meeting. But we haven't issued before we started with this program or this setup, because sometimes it puts, you don't come up with things until later on. You know, and it puts it's something, I don't know, we need to change, because we never had, or that I know of, never had problems before, unless they were not addressed. So the pressure is there to come up with things real quick.
I think part of the rationale behind this is twofold. One, with the adoption of the new Granicus agenda management system, it gives us time to get it put into the agenda and begin to develop the supporting documentation needed to support the conversation and help us as a staff be prepared to answer questions and make recommendations and be more effective at discussing what the issue is. And so that's been the nature of our request, is that if you have an item of concern, if you talk to us and we can't handle it in our conversations and it needs to go on the agenda, this gives us time to prepare the documentation and get it in a packet so that all the members can see the information in advance of the meeting. We also have posting requirements that are 72 hours. And so if 4 days before the meeting there's an item placed on the agenda, the software, it can be done, but it's challenging. But also that doesn't give staff a time to put together the information we need to present in the meeting to be able to handle the request effectively. So we would basically just ask that you give us a couple of extra weeks to pull information together, get it in the software so that all the council members can see the request and the information in advance of the meeting, so that we can all be as formed as possible when we go into the meeting live. Seth, did you have anything to add to that?
I would just add that is the intent. One, for staff to be able to be more forward-looking. And I can honestly say that I myself am also trying to get into the habit of being ahead a week, and it is a challenge to change our habit. But staff has the desire to be able to provide council and the public with sufficient information regarding whatever the question is. We realize that there's always going to be something that is pressing. Deadlines pop up on short notice on a regular basis. That's just life, and we'll have to address those as they do pop up. But as a matter of course and as a matter of preparation, we're just asking for additional time to make sure that we can give adequate response.
What would be the least amount of time you would need? Can we shorten that, or can we do something that, I'll speak personally for myself. Not only can I from today to tomorrow, because that's been the norm of the Friday after the meeting. If we get an email saying, hey, you have me out for the next meeting, maybe not at that moment, but the following week I may.
Sarah.
Mayor and Council. Sorry, Mr. Owner.
Sarah was going to comment.
Okay. Mayor and Council, Sarah Nichols, City Secretary. I do send out that email kind of as a courtesy reminder. That is geared more towards staff in order to get their stuff situated. But I do want to assure the council that if y'all come to me at 5 o'clock right before I post the agenda, I will work. That's what we're here for. We'll get your items onto the agenda. But this is to help the staff be more prepared. And we would appreciate if we could get the items sooner so we can give y'all as much sufficient information as we can. But we do understand that the council will come up with things last minute and we will accommodate you all.
I don't believe the intent is to deny you the ability to put something on the agenda short notice, because we do want to be responsive. Our request is if we can have as much notice as possible to allow us to do the research, put the information together, and push it out to all the council members in advance so they know what's coming and what the conversation is going to be.
Okay.
Councilman Morona, this is only a discussion item.
Yeah.
Would you like to put it on there as a discuss, consider in the next meeting?
Let me think about it, Councilman Davis, and I will put it on, or just leave it the way it is, sir.
Okay, sir.
I probably will. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I probably will, sir. I'll think of maybe a deadline. Extend the deadline a little bit more, present it as an action item.
Yes, sir. Good idea.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you. Well, that's the last of our agenda.
Do you have anything that needs for? Okay. So our attorney doesn't have anything that needs for executive session. Does any member of the council want to have an executive session?
I think, yeah. We want to discuss some stuff.
Okay. One of the things that we've done in anticipation of a potential executive session is I have another Google meeting ready. So we'll be emailing out each of you a different phone number and meeting code, so that give us probably 10-15 minutes to get everybody called into that new meeting. And those of us that are here will recess to this conference room next door. And so I'll push that email out to all the council members as well as to you, Seth. And it will not be the number you're using right now. One of the things I try to be clear is that when we finish executive session and come back to open, you'll need to recall the number you're using right now to close out the regular meeting. But I'm fixing to send you a new phone number and a new code specific to executive session. And so I'll be pushing that out shortly. So it'll take us probably 15 minutes to start the executive session. So if you want to call executive session now, and then we can take a break, or do we need to take a break? And
No, you need to move so that the council votes to go into executive session.
All right.
Just
Before we do, we want to, what I'm requesting is executive session for the council only. Can we do that? We can do it for the council only.
And you?
It's not really the You're allowed to go in, Council, you're allowed to go into executive session on a non-posted item to discuss with the city attorney items that the city council wants to discuss. And to go into executive session just with the council without the city attorney, I think would violate the Open Meetings Act. If you wanted to do that, we would have to post it in a certain way.
Okay.
It's not done on the agenda.
So do you still want the meeting? You'll probably at least have to have the attorney in there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All right. So I'm gonna send the invite out to all of the mayor and council members and to the attorney. I'll be in there long enough to get it started, and then I'll step out.
That's fine.
Okay. Seth, do you understand that? Are you okay with that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, they need to do a motion and second to go into executive. While you're doing that, I'm gonna get the details sent out.
Do I have a,
We don't need a motion, so we're going into executive session and do
we're not going to executive session, excuse me, Texas Government Code 551.071-551.072, 551.074 551087.
Time is 7:22.
And the time is 5:26.
All right, I'm gonna hang up and close this call, so that we can get the other one going.
Yeah.
Do we have Veronica back on? Do we have the mayor back on?
No.
And Seth, I believe you said you're here.
Yes, I'm on.
Okay. All right, so I think we still need the mayor and Veronica. And Sarah, here's the original call-in information for this call if Veronica or the mayor need it.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilwoman Baca?
Awesome. So now we're just missing the mayor.
Speaking in tongues.
Sarah, did you send that information back to me? Okay.
Look at the caption. Turn on caption.
Councilman O'Rourke, what do you call him?
Jason.
There's Mayor. I've seen caption. Just to see what it is.
Are we back?
All right, so we've got the mayor. So, Mr. Tez, I believe we have everybody back on the call. So you can bring us back into open session.
I will now open executive session under Texas Government Code 5.1.071 dash.
We're closing executive and going back into open.
Yes.
So yeah, you don't have to read all those numbers. Just say we're back in open session.
We're not going to, I will now open executive session.
And you'll say nothing before the council from executive session.
Nothing before the council.
I got some.
Oh,
Okay.
I do.
All right, so coming out of, we're back in open at 8:09 p.m.
Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem Davis, I want to move that the council invoke section 6.3 of the city manager's contract, the unilateral severance clause, and I further direct the city attorney, Mr. Rod Podman, and the city HR director, Kristen Irie, to prepare the paperwork necessary to follow the guidelines and requirements of section 6.3 of the contract.
Councilor Saldana, that's not an item that's on the agenda. That's an item that you can place on the agenda, on a future agenda, but the executive session was not on a specific call item, and so you can't take action on that motion. You can't take action on anything from the executive session.
So you can request that item be placed on the July 23rd meeting, but there's no motion or action that it can't legally be taken tonight. Okay.
Well, isn't it the executive session covers legal matters, employment, evaluations?
If you
It
want,
covers it all.
So you can discuss it, but you can't take action on it unless there's an open meeting agenda item, because the public has to know in advance what are the topics that you're potentially going to take action on. So you can receive information and talk about it in executive, but the actual motion, second action has to be on a published agenda. Is that right?
that's correct.
So why is it that we've done things in executive session and taken action?
Because they were posted.
You could, if you have if you have a posted item that has for an item for action, and you want to go into executive session to discuss that item, you can do that. And then you can come out of the executive session and take action on that item because it was an item posted on the agenda. But you can't take action on an item like personnel or a contract that's not posted on the agenda. you wanted to have a discussion in executive session about some general matters, you can do that, and y'all did that tonight. But you can't take any action that's not posted on the agenda because that violates the Open Meetings Act.
Okay.
So under G, discuss
All right.
items, you
Under
can
G,
direct
discuss
that, you can
items
direct
for
that to be
next.
added to the next agenda. Okay.
Yeah.
Discuss items for the next city council agenda.
That could be, you could request that, Councilor Serrano.
I requested.
Okay.
A special meeting can also be called with 72 hours posting, and so if it were posted tomorrow, it could be held, I believe, Monday at 5:30. Am I correct there?
Yes, sir.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So do y'all want a special meeting or just wait till the next regular meeting?
Special meeting.
All right, so,
You know, serious about that? That's another $20-$30 that they're gonna put in your check that you don't wanna take from the city.
Good call, good call.
I'll get, I don't want to compliment myself, I'll give it back to you. I'll get paid with it.
The thing is, I don't like this phone call stuff. I'd rather wait till we all good and clear, go back and do it like we're supposed to.
Exactly.
I would call it, I would ask the young group the next meeting, that way we're clear and we can look at each other and decide. They don't do something like this at all, but that's your call.
I agree. Done. So you put it to a vote.
Councilman Arona,
Yes, sir.
didn't you offer the city manager a 3% raise here recently?
1.5. Yes, sir. Following the guidelines of the contract.
And now why the change?
My prerogative, sir.
So you have a
Nobody
handler.
else is but mine.
So you have a handler, okay.
Oh, no, sir. You can handle mine.
You have a handler from the beginning.
Council members, I apologize for my comments early in executive session, but Mr. Reyes. No, sir.
Procedure.
No, sir. You are going way beyond the stepping down, sir.
Me, I think you have, sir. From the beginning, you have, sir.
No, sir.
Yes, sir.
No, sir.
Let's,
You give away too much, and you've been there long enough for not doing
Special
nothing.
meeting.
That's all I got to say.
The mayor or majority.
Okay. So to call a special meeting, the mayor can call a special meeting or a majority of the council. So if the mayor doesn't want a special meeting, then someone would have to move and second, and a majority, it would have to pass by a majority to get a special meeting on the calendar.
I make a motion that we, put a special meeting on the calendar for 72 hours from today.
Okay.
now second.
Sorry, you'll need to roll
I'm
call.
requesting a special meeting too. This is Councilwoman Trujillo.
So
Is this under open session?
it's open session item G. There's a motion for a special meeting that's been made and seconded. So
Well,
we,
that's just to discuss items, it's not consider items.
but to call an extra meeting, they can do that anytime. They can call a meeting.
Okay,
So we will need a roll call vote on that.
okay. Are you gonna call the motion in a second?
Motion, excuse me. Motion's been made to have a special meeting. All those in favor?
No, we're gonna roll call
Take a
it.
roll call. Okay.
Who motioned first and who motioned second?
Art Arona moved. Conrad Saldana second.
Okay, I'm gonna roll call now. Councilwoman Baca, for or against?
Again.
Councilwoman Trujillo, for or against?
Four.
Councilman Reyes, for or against?
Against.
Okay, with a vote of 3 to 2, the motion passed.
And so on the calendar, Monday is the 13th. So Monday the 13th at 5:30.
Okay.
That's it. Anything else on G, or you can go to H?
Anything more to discuss on this?
Any other items?
Any other item?
I've got one question.
Okay.
Where are we on the new baseball fields? Are we working on?
Yeah, they're about to finish up site preparation and all of our what we call major earthwork. They're wrapping that up. We're about to start underground utilities and forming up foundations.
Yeah, I've been driving by there.
Also, Councilman Arona, I'd like to see an update on the transportation reinvestment zone. Where we at with that? We haven't heard anything in quite a while.
The TERS.
Yes, sir.
See if we can get an update on those guys working on that house project, Steve's and them, because, the guy that wants to build a house is out with me again and saying that guys are doing whatever they're doing, and he's got 6 houses built. So let's find out where we're at on this, and see if they're up with the contract, where they're supposed to be.
On which project?
The one behind the city warehouse.
The Meadowbrook subdivision?
Meadowbrook, yes.
I got their most recent pay application. It's processing for payment next week. So they submitted a pay application. We processed it just like we always do. But I can prepare an update for that.
Okay, yeah, because the guy that wants to build a house, he's saying that they're just really slow and big.
Okay.
Are they done with
They're not completely done. They're working on sidewalks. The asphalt paving is done. They're working on sidewalks and ramps right now. They should be finished pretty soon. We'll have an update for you.
Thank you.
I also wanna, Councilwoman Baca, I also wanna see if we can put on the agenda, regarding the city secretary, who she actually, or the position actually answers to, if it's the city manager or the council. So we can bring that back.
According to the charter, it's to the manager.
Yes.
We'll research that.
That should be discussed.
We'll research that and see, because the charter should spell that out, and so we'll research that out and have an answer at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Also, who are the applicants for replacing Melanie? I'd like to see that.
We've got, Kristen, we've only got one candidate that we've got a phone interview scheduled for finance director. Is that correct?
Yes, on July 20th, we've had an interview, and only one viable candidate.
Yeah, we've only had one candidate so far. We've got a phone interview on July 20th. We'll push some information out to you on that. We can get that before.
Also, if we get in-house finance department, we had a person that used to do it when I got in. I don't know if she would be willing to do it again for interim, so we get some money saved up. So. Something to discuss.
We will be prepared to discuss that.
Okay. Thanks, sir.
We'll hear a motion to adjourn.
Councilman Arona, I make a motion to adjourn meeting.
Second. Motion to adjourn by Councilman Arona, and seconded by Councilman Saldana. All those in favor?
We don't have to roll call we don't have to roll call the adjourn. You can just do your all in favor of yea and nay. So.
Those in favor?
Yeah.
Aye.
Bye.
The time is 8:21 p.m.
8:20 p.m.